Can you keep up with the pace of market regulatory reform? MarketsReformWiki.com, the place to keep up.
How would you describe the transition to an electronic market?
I mean, it was easy to see because it was a commoditized product, and you would watch the volumes go from fully voice to fully electronic, and it happened over a very, very short period of time because the volumes ticked along and you watched them done electronically, and they stayed at a certain level, and then they spiked, and you knew that they weren't coming back.
Was the transition similar across each market?
We launched that product, I believe it was 1998, and that was in on-the-run treasuries. I would say at least 50, 60, 70% of the off-the-run business in treasuries is done still via voice. And you still have voice brokers that are doing some on-the-run treasuries, but for the most part, the product was commoditized, and once it becomes commoditized, it lends itself to the efficiencies of electronic trading, which you'll see in practically every product.
Eventually, will all products become commoditized?
You'll see the products become more commoditized, but I think one of the panelists mentioned an evolution. So I think you'll see that evolution with any product. And not every product lends itself to be electronic. Some just remain voice. There's not enough liquidity in the product to make it electronic or to push it electronic. But the one thing that I've learned over the course of my career is that you can't force the product to be electronic. It just doesn't work. Because at eSpeed or at Cantor, when we did launch the product, we launched an agency platform, and we launched a repo platform, and we launched a mortgage platform. All were unsuccessful at the time. All those products that I just mentioned trade electronically today. So a little bit ahead of its time, but there's no legislation that was written down that said it has to be electronic. So the markets will evolve on their own, and every company that's here today as in the interdealer space prefers it to go electronic as far as the margins are concerned, but we're not going to force it to go electronic because, one, there's a role for the voice broker, and that role is fulfilled day in and day out at each one of the firms.
Do you think the regulators are listening regarding the need for voice trading?
I think the regulators have heard the message loud and clear. I think we have to wait and see what the final rule looks like. It's, from what I understand, it's a 500-page document, so we should be seeing that hopefully soon. But I think that they've heard us loud and clear. It really is dependent on how the rule is written, whether they keep voice in or they don't keep voice trading in. But I think Congress was very clear when they wrote dodd-frank that any means of interstate commerce, and that would incorporate voice, electronic, or some combination of the both, to be allowed going forward. And that's not, I wouldn't think it was up for debate, although, as we've spoken to the legislators over time and to the CFTC, they question voice's existence in the future.
Is there genuine concern that if rules are not balanced across jurisdictions, we will see regulatory arbitrage?
It's pretty easy for a company to pick up business and move it elsewhere, especially if it is being done electronically, and if you're dealing with a global company, which Tullett Prebon is. Most of the other companies are global as well. So if you have global offices, there's no reason why you couldn't staff those desks and put them in a place where the legislation is more favorable. So I don't think that it would serve any purpose to have businesses move away from our borders, which is possible. And if it's a fully electronic business, it's even easier because all you're essentially doing is picking up a server and sending it to a foreign country where the legislation is much more understanding as far as execution rules are concerned.
Costs related to the new regulatory regime are growing just as volumes are diminishing across the board. How will this play out?
We've invested in technology for years now, so we didn't wait for Dodd-Frank to make investments in some of these product areas to have platforms. We've been making investments all along. So a lot of the existing platforms we have will have to tweak or enhance them to meet the Dodd-Frank regulations once they come out. It is a massive spend. I think it's going to be extremely difficult and a barrier to entry for a number of firms, especially if they plan on becoming a SEF for one product. I don't see how they survive. I also don't see how they can manage that spend in the current environment, which is what you said, depressed volumes, which is going on across all of the asset classes. But at some point it will pick up, and I think in large part it is due to the uncertainty. I think that the presidential elections have a lot to do with it, and the overall things going on outside of the U.S. Has an impact as well. So there are a number of things that come into play, but I think at some point, once the rules are finalized, you will see volumes pick back up, and I think companies like ours will be very well positioned, given that we've made the investment over time and have not tried to rush to market with a platform in a particular product area.